some of the verses that we are studying together in unique themes. And then therefore we can go ahead and progress through and look at some of the encouraging words that's been given to us for those Christians of that day and Christians of us ourselves today as we worship and serve God. Now, look at verse 1. It says, "Go to now, you rich men, weep and howl, for your miseries, they shall come unto you." So what we find here is the first warning, you might say, is that of trusting in riches. That's all that matters while we're here on this earth. It goes without saying that God's interested in everything concerning our money. Every blessing that's been given to us, regardless, if you think about it, whether it's our money or anything else, has a correspondent responsibility with that as well. We have been given blessings, but we have with that responsibility to use those blessings in the right way. We are, as we well know, are stewards. And so what we're trying to do is look at some of the discussion of these verses as it relates to these areas here. Now it says here, and reference this back in chapter 4, verse 13, it says to go to now, or to listen, to hear, to take heed to what is being said. Now, it talks about rich men. It says, "Go to now, ye rich men." These are those that have obtained wealth immorally, or those who've hoarded up their riches. And sometimes those are collected in a way that is not the most proper way to do this. They have been engulfed. They've been caught up. The only thing that these individuals can think about is, how do I make more money? How do I become richer in their own viewpoints there? A lot of the discussion here is written to those non-Christian Jews that were in the process of taking advantage of some of the Christians in hoarding up these particular areas. Someone, if you would please turn to Proverbs 11:28 and read. And someone, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and go to Luke 26:24, and someone Luke 18:24. So let's start off with Proverbs 11:28.
They who trust in riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like foliage.
Okay. All right. And trusting riches will fall. Look at Luke 6:24, going to the New Testament. Someone read Luke 6:24. Okay. And also Luke 18:24. Luke 18:24. Okay, thank you. So here's warning the rich people to have the right attitudes and the riches, and to have it in the right way. There's nothing wrong with being rich as long as we use those blessings in the proper way. And that holds true then, it holds true to us today. Now, when we talk about the rich men here, here's an example of one that was rich, that had the right responsibility, the right attitude, and that was Abraham himself. He maintained his faith. He was very rich, and he had a high character, well respected. And here's an example of success in this area, that it can be done, that it can be accomplished, and that it is nothing wrong with being rich, because this is a blessing that's been provided as long as we use it in the most effective way possible. However, Lot himself became rich and let it run his life. And it destroyed his character, and he lost his family because of it. So we see two examples here that this possibly could occur in regard to that. Look at the next part of the verse. It says, "For your miseries" here. And that is for your hardship, Brother Wood says, your suffering, and your great distresses here. And what will happen is, if we don't use our riches in the right way, these judgment will come upon us, and we have to stand before God and take the consequences in regard to that. It says, judgment will not be kind to those who choose mammon over God. Now, let's look at verses 2 and verse 3. Verse 2 and verse 3, this talks about the hoarding of riches, the keeping, the making, the acquisition of these riches here. Verse 2, your riches are corrupted and your garments are moth-eaten. Verse 3, your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, shall eat your flesh as if it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together in the last days. Now, there are three basic types of wealth that's referenced here according to those that have written commentaries and historians and all of that. First type of wealth that may be referenced here is that of produce, that of grains, that of vegetables and other things of this nature. Another riches that may have been referenced here is that of clothing, of the apparel that individuals had. And then the third was that of jewels and that of precious metals. So when we're talking about the riches here, we're talking about these. Well, it's obvious that gold and silver can't rust. But we'll talk about this a little bit more, in that it certainly could be a detriment to us if we don't use that type of wealth in the proper ways at all possible. Now, for the corrupted, it's rotten, it's worthless. Your riches have rotted here. We know that the gold and silver can't do that, but other things that we're talking about here certainly can. And your garments are moth-eaten. Material things offer no lasting security to us. Wealth, when not used to good purposes, become worthless. So what good is it going to do us if we are wealthy in material things when we die? It's over with. But it could be used if we think about those things, and there's so many. We're talking about riches here and using. I hope that no one thinks, by the way we're talking about this, that this congregation doesn't use our blessings in a very good way. This is an awesome congregation, and we use our blessings and our riches in ways that can help the service of the Lord. But what we've got to look at ourselves individually is, what could we possibly do more, even with what we have? Because we may not have the abundant wealth that individuals may think of, but we're rich. We're really, really rich. And we need to be aware of that and take heed to that there. Now, as we said, talking about cankering, we know that gold and silver and precious metals can't canker. They can certainly tarnish, possibly. And it's figurative. We're talking about gold and silver not rusting in regard to that specific area there. Now, and the rust of them shall be witness against you. What are we referring to here? We've already said that, obviously these precious metals don't rust, but it says the rust of them shall be witness unto you. What is being conveyed here? Exactly right. June says it's the wealth of ungodly treasures that have been collected and how those were achieved that will be a witness to those that are hoarding up these riches at the cost of Christians and others. They'll have to stand witness to that and stand before judgment upon that. Yes. Yes, it would. Yes, it would. Most certainly would there. In the day of judgment, the Lord will say in Matthew 28, 42, 43, to those who had much of the world's goods, I was hungered and you gave me no meat. And so it's how we collect them and how it's been used that will be witness toward those in regard to that. Now, the interesting thing is as those that were rich were in the process of wanting more riches. So the way they did it was they would take those individuals and take them to court to get what they could out of them. Well, guess who's going to have to face the day of court themselves if they don't use those riches, or if they have acquired them in the wrong way in regard to those there. They're going to have to stand judgment themselves for the way these have been collected in regard to that. You shall eat flesh as if it were fire. There will be complete destruction. Every part of what we're talking about will be destroyed as it relates to here. Now, the application that we have here, oops, not that one yet. Okay. Go back, I think we can do that. Look at here. All right, good. Now, blessings are temporary. And we need to use whatever we have to the glory of God. And that's an application for us today. If we don't use what we have, it will rust. We'll have to be accountable for our use of that in the day of judgment itself. Any comments on verse 3? Okay, verse 4. In verse 4, we start talking about the danger of gaining riches the wrong way. And this is one of the categories here in regard to that. In the Old Testament, let's read this verse first. I'm a little ahead of myself. Oh, the hire the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped and are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. And so, the rich had a tendency sometime to take advantage of their laborers or their hires in many different ways in order to hoard up and to collect these. And one way was that they would have them to work for them, but then they wouldn't pay them. Wouldn't give them their rightful dues or their wages that were due them. Now, someone turn, if you would please, to Deuteronomy 24, verses 14 and 15. Deuteronomy 24, 14 and 15, if you would read this, please. Uh, 14 and 15, Deuteronomy 24. Thank you. Let's turn to Luke chapter 10, verse 7. Someone turn to Luke 10, verse 7. And 1 Timothy 5, 18. Let's look at Luke 10, 7. Then someone 1 Timothy 5, 18. Timothy 5 and 18.
For the scripture says, you shall not boast that ox treads out the grain, and the laborer is worthy of his hire.
Okay, thank you very much there. So we see verses in both the Old Testament and New Testament that support the idea that these individuals should be paid, and rightfully so. But it was not the case. They were being cheated. They were not given what was due to them, and the warning is you need to pay those that work for you on your behalf and not hoard up these. You're already rich in regard to that area there. It talks about their cries here. They're continually, the laborers are continually wanting revenge. They want vengeance. They want it to be corrected to where it will be in their particular favor there. Now, if we go down to the rest of the verse, it says, and which will reap and enter into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Now, what are we talking about here? What is this reference here, Daryl? Sabaoth, okay. That's a Mississippi.
Greek
Yes.
transliteration of the Hebrew Sabaoth.
Mm-hmm.
So Sabaoth,
Okay.
and it means host, Lord of hosts, Lord of hosts, host of heaven.
Right.
Armies of heaven.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. Armies of heaven. Thank you very much. So, this is going to come upon that individual that we're talking about, that we just said, the Lord of heavens, armies of heaven, in regard to that, the host of heaven there. God's concerned about how we use our funds, use our money, and we're going to be accountable, as we said, for that. Now, verse number 5. You have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. You have nourished your hearts as in the day of slaughter. Now, you've lived in pleasure on the earth. They've lived high style. They've fattened their hearts. They are very well blessed. They live in luxury. They are very extravagant with what they do. And the only problem is at the expense of other individuals. So they have misappropriated and are using this in the wrong way. And it says, and been wanton. And that is, they've lived in lewdness and lasciviousness, and their selfishness will lead to their destruction of their soul if it's not corrected in regard to that. It says, ye have nourished, and nourished here in the term means fattened, like they're trying to build up their wealth to make it bigger, to prepare for more things to come in regard to that. And one of the commentaries said here about the nourishing of trying to gather up these, it's like trying to fatten up an animal before slaughter in that way, in regard to that. And talks about the day of slaughter here is referenced as the day of judgment. Day of judgment. Brother David Roper, in his book, The Practical Christianity, which is on the book of James, said that if we use our blessings only for ourselves, like the ones that James speaks of, we may be fattening our own hearts for the day of slaughter. So we need to use that for ourselves, but also for others as well in regard to that. Someone turn to Matthew 20 and verse 28. Matthew 20, verse 28. And read it, please. Good.
Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Let's look at verse 6. You have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. Condemned here is a term that is a legal term for judgment, you might say, or a sentence being handed down. It refers to that of the just, and who would we be talking about here? You have condemned and killed the just. Who are we talking about here? Christ. Christ is, and there's also a different viewpoint, is that Christ representing all Christians, but it's Christ here. So Christ is our example. He resisted not in 1 Peter. Someone turn to 1 Peter 2, 21 to 23. 1 Peter 2, 21 to 23, and someone be kind enough to turn to Isaiah 53, 7, please. So whoever gets to 1 Peter 2, 21 to 23. Okay. And let's also look at Isaiah 53:7.
He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shears is silent. So he opened not his mouth.
Okay. So the question here, as we see here, is how should Christians act under persecution? Matthew 5:39. Let's turn together. Matthew 5:39. But I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. Romans 12:19. Someone be kind enough to read that. Romans 12:19, please. Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Eldon. Okay. So this is how we are to follow. But Jesus himself, as Christ, as our example, did not have any resistance when he was persecuted in regard to those areas there. Verses 7 and 8, our theme is to be patient. We're switching from riches to that of encouraging us to be patient, having patience when we go about our work as a Christian there. And so, verse 7 and 8, be patient, therefore, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it until he receive the early and latter rain. Be ye also patient, stabilize your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth near. Now, be patient, therefore, brethren. In other words, we want to be long-suffering, willing to endure what we have that challenges us there. We're encouraged not these individuals that are oppressed, individuals that are challenged, persecuted. We're encouraged not to retaliate, have retribution. We want to make sure that we still serve and are patient as we go about our work there. So that of patience. The example that's given here is what? What's the example? I mean, it's obvious right there. You're looking at it, but what is that? I mean, perfect. I'm sorry? Yeah, exactly right. Christ's return. Behold, the husband waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience of it until he receive the early and latter rain. And so it could be that, like a example of earthly example would be a farmer, would it not? Plant the seed and you got to wait. You got to be patient. Time will come. It'll be time. We can't get too anxious for that. But there will be a time when we will have the harvest, and we have to have the patience to do what we need to in regard to that. Stabilize your hearts. Be stable. Make firm. Be sure, unwavering. Confirm one's mind that what we're doing is the correct thing. We need to establish in our heart that we're going to be patient. And sometimes patience is a challenge. I think patience can be a challenge on us in many things that we go about and that we are trying to do in regard to that area there. Look at verse 8. But it says, the latter part says, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. The return, this is what Brother Wood says, the return of Christ is so real, so certain, so sure of fulfillment that he is always regarded as near at hand. Pretty good thoughts in regard to that, specifically there. We don't know when the time will be. Matthew 26:36-39 lets us know that, but we also do know that it is drawing near for us. Look at 2 Peter. Someone turn to 2 Peter, please. 3, and let's read 10 through 13. 2 Peter 3, 10 through 13. 2 Peter 3, 10 through 13.
But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, and the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up.
Okay. And read 13 too, Charlie. Please. Oh, I'm sorry. That was chapter 3, 10 through 13. Yeah. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look to the new heavens and the new earth in which righteousness dwells. That's 2 Peter 3, 13 there. Okay. Now, we need to be patient in the work of the Lord, what we try to do. And sometimes patience challenges. Have we ever started a program, any program? It could be in work. It could be in the congregation. We're all excited about it. And it's just not moving as quickly as we think it ought to be moving. Then we start getting a little bit impatient about it. And, you know, we just have to have patience. We don't need to become discouraged because it's not acting on the timing that we feel like it needs to be. We need to be patient, keep on going, and the outcome will be there. Verse 9. There, what time is it, Ken? 10 o'clock. Okay, good. All right. Now, verse 9. Grudge not one against another, brethren, lest ye be condemned. Behold, the judge standeth before the door. The term grudge here is don't grumble, don't murmur, don't groan against individuals, other brothers of like faith there. We shouldn't do those type things in regard to that. But if we do, we're going to find out that we'll be condemned. We're under distress. We're impatient about the things that are taking place. We don't need to be. We may be quarrelsome with others. We may blame others for troubles. We may be easy to take offense and quick to find fault with what others have. But we've got to have patience with our own brothers and sisters and those around about us. And we want to make sure that we're always careful not to judge individuals wrongfully in regard to that specific area there. Our next challenge that we have is found in verse 10 and 11, and that is that we need to be patient in the midst of trials. If we're in trials, we need to be patient as well. Take, my brethren, the prophets who have spoken in the name of the Lord for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. Behold, we count them happy which endure. Ye have heard of the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. Now, perfect example of being patient in the midst of trials, as we have here, are those of the prophets and Elijah, Elisha, Jeremiah, Daniel, Ezekiel, for some. And what a great example to have these individuals to look to that demonstrated what we're talking about right here. They suffered great wrongs, and they persevered without complaining. Look at 2 Chronicles 36:16. Someone read that one, please. 2 Chronicles 36:16. Someone turn to 1 Thessalonians 2:15, please.
But they mocked the message of God, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord rose against his people, until there was no room.
Okay. In 1 Thessalonians 2:15. Okay. So, what an example that we have in regard to these here. We suffer through affliction, and we suffer, and we have to have patience there. If we're living the Christian life, if we are serving as we need to serve, are we going to have trials? Yes, absolutely. First, 2 Timothy 3:12, all that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution there. Now, behold, we count them happy which endure. They hold strong to the end. They remain under the guidance and faith that they're supposed to have. They exhibit their patience in regarding all things in this area here. Now, if you look at the latter part, you have heard the patience of Job and have seen the end. The end is the goal that was in front of them, their purpose, the outcome, and the end intended for the Lord is for us to stay faithful as we proceed. The Lord is very pitiful. He's full of pity. He's tenderhearted. He's compassionate. And he has an abundance of things that can provide for us if we only trust in him. He can bring great joy for us, fulfill our needs through his tender mercy that he has there. Applications for us today is to try to do right and persecutions to come. We need to maintain the right attitudes. We need to resolve to remain faithful, and we can endure whatever's asked in regard to that. Verse 12, it talks about being patient in our speech. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay, your nay, nay, unless you're yet fall into condemnation here. Term swear not. This is affirming or denying an oath, as Brother Turner says. And here it's thought, commentaries are thinking when it says swear not here, it's maintainly thinking about that of, is what we're talking about here. A lot of people, when you see swear, thinks about profanity and everything, but it's not referenced here. It's mainly taking and affirming or denying an oath that we have here in regard to that. We need to be truthful, never a time to be deceitful, and lying is always wrong there. It's not talking about forbidding taking an oath in court. We have examples of God's name, oaths were taken in God's name. Deuteronomy 6:13. One must never swear falsely. Leviticus 10:12. Paul's use of oaths in the scriptures you see here, and Christ and oaths himself. And so we have to be aware of these type and these things. Now, look at the latter part of it. Oops, just blew right over that one. Sorry about that. Person of truth, speech and simple is simple to understand, and his word shall always be the bond, is what Brother Turner says. The latter part of that says, but let your yea be yea and your nay, nay, lest you fall into condemnation. Now, as we go to 13 through 15, we switch to a new theme, and that is prayer. We're encouraged to pray all the time. In verses 13 through 18, if you take the time to look at it, prayer is mentioned 7 different times. And whatever the situation in life, prayer is appropriate. We know that. And there's always power in prayer. Let's look at verses 13 through 15. Is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing hymns. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith shall save the sick, verse 15, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. Now, is any among you afflicted or that of suffering? And We know that we have the ability to embrace all the types of affliction. We can work through that. We can have and overcome these obstacles if in trust in our prayer and our life that we have in regard to these areas here. Now, verse 13, is any among you praying? Let him pray. Keep on praying. Whatever the cause, problem, prayer will be an answer for us in regard to that. Examples is Jesus himself prayed. We see the apostles prayed. And we see that Paul and Silas prayed. And we ourselves are challenged to as well. It asks here, is any merry? And, okay, God forgive any burden there. Okay, now that's interesting because I took that slide out and it didn't go away. So anyway, okay, no wonder I was lost on that. I was like, wait a minute, where does this come from? It's questions we can ask ourselves: is prayer a privilege or pain? Is it power or a problem for us? Is it opportunity or obligation? Is it a blessing or a bore? And is it comfort or chore for us? And these are attitudes as we enter our prayer life in regard to those areas there. Is any merry? Cheerful, friendly, joyful, free of anxiety. There's no better way to express joy than to do what? Sing. Sing. Exactly right. It says sing psalms, and that is a cappella. And there's no place in the worship service of praise for instrumental music. Lord never authorized it. Apostles never sanctioned it. No New Testament writer ever commanded it. And the New Testament church never did practice it. And so, a cappella singing of hymns in our prayer life in regard to that. Brother Woods, here's what Brother Woods said about this. Dozens of the world's most profound Greek scholars, including all of those who have produced the major English translations, have borne witness to the fact that the New Testament meaning of the word does not include the use of mechanical instrument. And that it means today is simply to sing. Verse 14, is any among you, let him call to the elders of the church, let him pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And so we are to care for and pray for those that are sick, and let them call themselves on the name to the elders. Why? Why should this take place? Anybody? Mm-hmm. Exactly right. Exactly right. They have a role over us. They watch for our souls. They're qualified men of God, and they're mature and spiritual men that we can draw off of. The term here of anointing is related to symbolically and ceremonial as oil, and spoken in regard to that area there. Talks about through the 15, it talks about the verses, and you can go through that part. If we had time, if verses 16 through 18 talks about prayer is powerful. Some examples that you can go through and look at there. And confessing our faults one to another and praying for one another. It's demonstrated by Paul and many others that we have here. If you look through verse 19 and 20, it's the last two verses that close on our being sure that we are spiritually alert and make sure that our spiritual health is where it needs to be in regard to those areas there. Sorry we ran out of time, but it's been a pleasure this quarter to be able to be with you and for us to have opportunity to study together the book of James. Thank you very much.